Alright, we have arrived to part 3 of Eleanor of Aquitaine series by Extra History, The Devil's Brood. Last time, she basically is supporting her sons in rebelling against their father, which is just wild. So I'm looking forward to seeing where all that goes. So let's just get to it, guys.
Spring, 1173, Aquitaine. Henry's sons are in revolt, gone to Paris to ally with Eleanor's ex-husband Louis and his son Philip, and Eleanor is on the road. Her goal is unclear. She hasn't rebelled against her husband, but also hasn't condemned her 3 rebel sons or raised troops for Henry to use. Rumor has it she may be headed for Paris herself, and court gossip even swirls that she instigated this whole standoff as part of a dark plot. So Henry's soldiers capture her on the road and take her back to him. She will now be her husband's captive as well as his queen. Insurance that Aquitaine will not revolt, and a hostage to try to bring her sons to the negotiating table. Eleanor, the most powerful woman in Europe, will be a prisoner for the next 16 years.
Dang.
Thanks so much to Brilliant for helping us tell today's historical tale. Eleanor of...
That is wild. Straight up abducts her. But that is a pretty shrewd but understandable move. Like, yeah, secure Aquitaine's loyalty, and have a bargaining chip. Yeah, I get the move completely.
of Aquitaine, powerful and savvy, has always attracted a lot of stories. And one of the big ones is that she was some sort of dark mastermind, secretly convincing her sons to rebel.
I think that kind of goes with the portrayal of, like, women in history, right? Like, I think people are more often to kind of, like, rule powerful women in a more negative-ish light, I feel. Especially back then, like, oh, she's a witch, oh, she's a dark sorceress or something like that. Yeah, sometimes women can have it really rough in terms of being portrayed by history because, obviously powerful women weren't the most highly looked upon, especially in a male dominated world, right? So I don't know. Again, I just see sometimes you can kind of doubt the validity of certain situations and who's writing about this and what did they have to gain by writing this. Oh gosh, I started.
However, that's not accurate. Now, don't get us wrong, Eleanor wasn't above using her kids as chess pieces. That was actually kind of her whole thing, but by most accounts, she wasn't even around when young Henry finally snapped and decided to challenge his father. If she had been pulling the strings, Henry probably would have divorced her and kept her in worse conditions. But as had been the case with her divorce from Louis, court figures found Eleanor a convenient scapegoat to blame the rebellion on. Rather than Henry deciding to make his son co-ruler, but then giving him no actual power. For a decade, Eleanor was removed from the political board, unable to see her children, and confined in luxurious solitude at English castles. While she was allowed to appear at Christmas courts, otherwise she watched from the sidelines as her family tore itself apart. To put it simply, while Eleanor was imprisoned, her sons raised rebellions and fought their father, surrendered, went back to crush the rebellions they'd caused, then fought each other. Though that was kind of par for the course for Henry's family. In fact, Henry's bloodline, the Plantagenets, were so known for their anger issues and infighting that one of their nicknames was the Devil's Brood. According to legend, they were descended from a marriage between a French noble and the literal daughter of Satan. But I digress. So what did Eleanor think about this familial civil war? Well, like so many things with her, the documents don't tell us directly and we have to read between the lines. And for Rob's part, he thinks this is where Eleanor entered the final phase of her life. The first phase had been about protecting her own power as Lord of Aquitaine. The second was about founding the Angevin Empire with her marriage to Henry and securing its future through producing children. But now, her great work was to keep this red-haired devil's brood from tearing apart what she and Henry had built, a task that would encompass the rest of her life. See, she was essentially living out her own political ambitions through her sons and building Angevin power through her daughters' marriages. This third and final phase began in 1183. When Eleanor had a dream where she saw her son Henry wearing 2 crowns, one atop the other. The crown of eternal life above that of his earthly power. Soon, she got the news that he had died of dysentery while campaigning against Richard. This dream haunted Eleanor, especially since one of Henry's deathbed acts was to beg the king to release her. Richard was now the heir presumptive. And that was a problem, because King Henry thought Richard would be too powerful if he was both heir to England and Duke of Aquitaine. So, as a condition of becoming heir, he ordered Richard to give up Aquitaine to his no longer landless brother, John. See, while most of the family considered John irresponsible and duplicitous, he had never joined his brothers in rebellion, and therefore had become Henry's favorite. Oh, yeah, Richard refused. As a compromise, Henry wheeled Eleanor out of captivity so Richard could formally hand Aquitaine back to her, letting Eleanor re-enter politics in a limited capacity. Oh, and John, as you can imagine, just loved being passed up again. Eleanor was still a captive and kept within Henry.
Dang, freaking John, man. Poor guy. He's just like he's not really getting much out of anything.
Sight. However, her movement became less restricted. But that missing decade had also changed her family. Her children were now adults, and apart from helping negotiate the marriage of two of her daughters to the King of Sicily and the King of Castile, she really had no part in their lives. A thing that only became more tragic, since 3 years after losing Henry, Geoffrey also died in a freak jousting accident, and in June 1189, her eldest daughter Matilda, Duchess of Saxony, also passed away. In her life, Eleanor had been so lucky as a mother. Only one of her 10 children, 8 with Henry, had died before adulthood. Plus, she herself had survived again and again the lethality of medieval pregnancy and childbirth. But now that lucky streak seemingly ended, and the next death changed everything. Days after Matilda's death, Richard, again in revolt, this time alongside Louis's son King Philip II of France, defeated Henry in battle. And having been sick from many years spent campaigning, Henry then confirmed Richard as his heir and withdrew to his capital at Chinon. And there, the man who had been Eleanor's husband, lover, and jailer finally died. Richard's first act as king was to send word across the channel that his mother was to be freed and treated as acting on his behalf in all things. Eleanor emerged from her imprisonment more powerful than she'd ever been. While not officially regent, it was understood that she acted for Richard and that her word was his. As her first act, this Dowager Queen, formerly imprisoned by her husband, toured England to release Henry's other political prisoners, a personal gesture to win back loyalty for Richard and separate him from his father. Her next task was to make Henry's final arrangements, and in what has been read as a symbolic gesture, she had his body sent to an abbey in Aquitaine on her lands. There, in a building run by women, she put him in a tomb slightly lower than the one she later built for herself. She literally buried him. And when Richard returned...
Dang, that's a kind of a power move. That's a power move I feel like you could read deep into. But, man, just when it seems like things aren't going well for her, it just suddenly turns, like... Wow. A very interesting life so far.
To England in September of 1189, it was Eleanor who arranged his coronation. But, as soon as he was crowned, he started preparing to leave. See, 2 years earlier, Richard heard that Saladin had taken Jerusalem and swore to join the Third Crusade. Now, Eleanor was dubious about this idea, having been on crusade herself and knowing how dangerous it could be. Richard should be securing his throne by fixing the damage.
Holy crap, I just realized this is Richard the Lionheart. Holy crap, I didn't know that. And then John, the evil King John... Dude, I just had a mind blown right now. My mind just blew right now. I didn't know that. Like I said, I've heard so much about, you know, Saladin came up and then Richard, the it all connected. Holy crap, my mind finally put it all together. That is so cool. Like, obviously I've heard so much about Richard the Lionheart and his, you know, evil younger brothers. He's always depicted evil, you know, John. Dang, I didn't know about like his parentage and, you know, Eleanor being his mom. Wow, that is so cool, dude. Dang, that's cool.
Damages the war had wrought, as well as marrying and producing heirs. But Richard didn't really care about England, you know, apart from taxing it to fund wars. So instead, he liquidated the treasury, raised a special tax to fund his crusade, then just left. For years. Now, you can hear more about Richard's adventures in our Saladin series, but from Eleanor's perspective, he basically left her to sort out the mess, including his marriage. For 20 years, Richard had been betrothed to King Philip's half-sister Alice, the daughter of Eleanor's ex-husband Louis by his second wife. But Richard and Philip's alliance was rickety, and for years, Richard's father had made Alice his mistress, so she wasn't suitable, which
Oh.
made it basically a deal breaker. Eleanor instead proposed Berengaria of Navarre, whose Spanish province protected Aquitaine's southern border, and where the culture was similar to Aquitaine. But Richard was already headed out to the Holy Land, meaning Berengaria had to be delivered to him en route for the marriage to take place. So, Eleanor had to cross the Pyrenees into Spain, pick Berengaria up, travel back across the mountains, overland through Europe, cross the Alps, and board a ship to meet Richard in Sicily. Keep in mind, she was almost 70. Whew, that finally done. She returned
Dang, man. That's a baller move. I respect that.
to England and found the place in chaos. Richard's Council of Regents had fell to infighting, and who was there to take advantage? John, the untrustworthy baby of the family. He'd taken London and set up a rival court there, claiming that he'd saved England from corrupt and incompetent regents, and that he was the natural successor, considering Richard was unmarried, had no children, and let's be honest, was probably dead by now. But when word of Richard's marriage filtered back via Eleanor and returning knights, John's brief appearance of legitimacy faded. And incredibly, the family just sort of smoothed it over. I mean, you know John, right? I'm sure he won't cause any more trouble. Except he would, because in 1192, word reached England that Richard the Lionheart, hero of the Crusade, had secured the coastal Crusader states from Saladin and was headed back home, but then vanished. The King of England just disappeared from the map. John, claiming his brother was dead and that he was the rightful king, took a ship for France and entered an alliance with King Philip, leaving Eleanor to find and rescue one son while protecting his crown from the other. Oh, yikes.
Dang, that is wild. She's like 70. Like, my great grandma died like a year, well, I guess 2 years ago. You know, at the age of 70. Like, she was old and obviously sick, and here this woman is just going through Europe, still trying to make things happen. That's wild. This was a great episode. Like, I like how my mind just connected the dots. Like, oh, wait a minute, I know these people. Like, suddenly I knew who Richard and John were. Like, oh no, that was cool. That was a great moment. I'll remember this. And yeah, I guess next part is the final part for the most part. Part 4. So I'll see you guys tomorrow to wrap this up. Bye, everyone.